With the news that Martin Zubimendi's impending transfer to Arsenal is basically done, in this video we're going to talk about why you should be excited about Zubimendi's arrival and why he was the priority signing to make this summer. So let's get into it. Now, of course, Martin Zubimendi has been a player that has been spoken about multiple times by a lot of Arsenal fans because the deal has basically been confirmed since January. Now, despite that, we have finally got the here we go in many senses, and with the reports of him having his medical coming up soon, it does look like his deal to Arsenal has finally been completed after all this time, which is obviously a brilliant thing. Now, while I have done a lot of videos about Martin Zubimendi and talked about his importance, I think this is an incredible signing for Arsenal, and I think that Arsenal fans should be excited about this player coming in. I think there's been a lot of signings from Arsenal where there's maybe been that level where they have to progress and improve as a player before they become a major component of the first team, but this is one of them players that simply does not have that. And because I think his fee is a little bit less than some midfielders that we have bought and other teams have bought, I think he is getting disrespected a lot by a lot of people, which I don't think is fair. Now, first of all, this deal is a complete perfect acquisition from the club because of the finances involved. £52 million was his release clause. It is being able to be paid over a couple of years as well, so it's not all straight lump sum. And I think when people see that sort of money, they assume it is quite a lot. But when you think about the central midfield and the defensive midfield market, I would say it's probably the most expensive market other than maybe striker to buy players in football. And considering Arsenal were able to get a player for that cheap to be a first team starter for the team next season is going to be a major thing. I think you can see why teams like Liverpool and Man City have been linked before. When you're looking at people like Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Declan Rice, even probably a Baleba if he's to leave Brighton within the next few years. Zubimendi might not be as flashy as some of them players, but he is definitely good at what he is. And I do think when Arsenal get him in the team, there's going to be a lot of acquisition and changes within the squad, which will make us a better team. Now, first of all, I think one of the major changes within the squad is that Arsenal will now finally be a lot more comfortable in possession and going centrally. Now, Martin Zubimendi is one of them players that has been mentioned to be play in a double pivot if you want to, but he can play as that lone six. And he's a very different player to someone like Partey, so with the reports of Partey potentially signing a new deal with Arteta wanting him to stay, I think you can see the difference between the players already. Partey is a very much more second ball player. He finds them knockdowns by the other team and gets on the end of little interceptions and is very much a risk player. He takes risky passes into the middle. He will take players on when he feels like it and get them runs through. While Zubimendi is that much more Jorginho style player, much more comfortable on the ball, much more willing to calm things down in the tempo, but also play quick when he needs to, and also much more of a passer than a runner compared to Partey, who is a good passer and a runner as well, but I think through his career you would say he's definitely been a more runner type, even though right now I would argue he's more passer. Now, the reason why this is going to help Arsenal a lot is because not only the midfield will change, and we'll get into that, but it's the fact that Arsenal need more central progression. We have seen a lot of times this season where Arsenal's only real way of getting around the block and getting to that final third is through the wide areas. You often see people like Rice or Odegaard pull outside the block to receive it in the spaces and then be able to run through into that space, which is good and it gets Arsenal into that final third very easily, but then it just seems like Arsenal run out of ideas. We get to them wing positions, we don't have enough players in the box because our midfielders have pulled out wide to receive, and even sometimes when Havertz was playing, he was recovering all the way out wide to help the team and there was just no one in there. And then it pushes teams who can get back quickly into low blocks or deeper mid blocks, and then the problem with that is that Arsenal are down the wing crossing it to no one, and we're seeing this consistently happen against teams that just want to shut up shop, especially at the Emirates. And even games where Arsenal maybe get a win or maybe have a good scoreline overall, it is definitely been a difficult period, and Arsenal's problems aren't necessarily catered always to them big games. I think there's obviously moments you could talk about strikers in them sort of instances, but the major issue this season for Arsenal has been against low blocks and mid blocks over the last couple of years, the physical ones that can really bully Arsenal out of tight areas and stop them from basically progressing it at all through the middle. And in the Premier League we are bottom for progressions through the middle, which is down to how we play, but ultimately is something we have to improve if we want to win the league. Now, Zubimendi is a player that is going to bring that in bucket loads. He is someone that is so good at progressing that ball through the central areas. He can pass it incredibly well through the lines as well, which I think will help the team sort of dynamically change and allow players to come more centrally sometimes, and we not always have to play so wide. But more importantly, when he gets pressed as well in tight areas, he can keep the ball very well and be calm on it, then passing the ball off. I do think Arsenal have a situation where we need to calm things down a lot more than we have done in the past. I think in some games, I think with the transitional based football being played in the Premier League, having someone like Zubimendi can also play them transitional passes quickly through the line centrally is going to be key. But he doesn't have to all the time. He can play brilliantly against a low block and take his time to find the passes through the gaps. And I do think he will come in with so much experience, which yet again we need, and I think it's one of the reasons why Partey is staying, because we just don't have many older players within the squad. He's played at high levels in his career. He will be with a good team around him, and he can versatilely play. I think he's not necessarily just set in that defensive midfield position. If there's a game where Rice might be injured, or maybe he's just not playing very well right now, there is always an idea of you can play Zubimendi in that left 8 spot and also play Partey behind him, so they can rotate as a double pivot sometimes, and then Zubimendi can push. Now, in these moments, you don't want Zubimendi necessarily being that real attack player, but he can also be very effective at stopping counter attacks and being very important to the counter press like Rice is. Not as aggressive as Rice, but he can have the positioning, I think, which is very important. And also he's going to be a player, more importantly, that platforms others. If you have Miles in left back, he'll be able to make them runs a lot more with Zubimendi in them sort of areas, helping him. And I do think that his intelligence will be seen in the game. And we know Arteta really likes intelligent players. He likes players that can play different tactical systems and change within a game. And Zubimendi has proven he can do that multiple times. And he is a big game player. He was brilliant in that Euro final, which everyone mentions, but he was when he came on. And he's the closest thing to a non-physical player we're going to get as Rodri. Like, what I mean by that, as the passing level is going to be as good as Rodri, the intelligence is going to be there. He's not going to be physical and that real tackler player, and that's why maybe a double pivot with Rice or Partey would be a better, because there'd be that more physical, aggressive sort of type that can win the ball back, which Zubimendi isn't naturally going to do. He's more intelligent, takes his time, finds interceptions, and he isn't exactly the quickest player either. Now, we've made things work with Jorginho, and what we did with Jorginho is play him quite closer to a lot of the players around him who can cover a lot more area, but I don't really worry about that with Rice. Rice is that sort of player that can cover all the areas around him and help him in the physical battles, and then you give Zubimendi the ball when you're in settled play to great results, which is something that Rice has struggled with, and you can see that they both benefit off each other. And I think Partey can also play into that as well, and I think he will play good minutes next season. Now, I think the biggest question we have about Zubimendi coming in is not about his performances necessarily, it's about how that midfield's going to look. I think it's quite well known that Arsenal will play a double pivot sometimes. In possession, it will sometimes also be a 4-3-3, and you might see Rice move into that left half channel to box crash if we get the ball progression up the wing. I don't expect us to always do that, but sometimes if it doesn't work through the centre, that can be an option. And you expect sometimes maybe when Arsenal are holding out a lead, you might see Arsenal go into a bit more of a low block, mid block you could say, and Zubimendi will sit back with that double pivot with Rice or Partey being in there, which I do think can be effective. Now, we spoke about it many times, I spoke about it on the podcast with Forder, but the Odegaard role is very interesting, because the problem I think Odegaard has had a lot of the times this season is that I just don't think the angles on that right hand side, not necessarily are not favourable to him, because I think he doesn't mind them. I just think as a whole they are quite limited. He has not a lot of area to be a freedom attacker midfielder, as much as I think he is an 8 because he's better at progression. But even then, it's hard for him to make these insane creative numbers and passes through when there's not really much movement in front of him and there's not really many angles. He's basically stuck in this half right channel on the right hand side. Now, this is why I think if you have a double pivot in some games, it is definitely beneficial. I think that Arsenal can have a natural 10 or a natural attacking midfielder, and Odegaard can still demand the press, and I think off the ball when the other teams are building up against us, have Odegaard in his right hand side role and doing the same sort of idea there. But other than that, he should be played a lot more centrally. I still think on the left he can offer a lot when he delves into them sort of positions, putting the ball through. And I do think that we've seen towards the end of the season his finishing again get much better. Liverpool, PSG, and obviously the brilliant goal against Southampton to end the season. And I personally don't think Odegaard's finishing is completely done. I know there's been a lot of talks about it. Maybe that injury with the ankle is definitely playing a part, and he hasn't been great at finishing this entire season, but he does have that level that we know he can produce. And I'm hoping last year was just a bad year for him, maybe not recovered from that injury fully, give him a good preseason and see how he does. Now, I don't think this necessarily doesn't mean that we shouldn't sign a versatile attacker for an attacker midfield role, which I have mentioned. Also, Winery, I think, will really thrive in these central spaces a bit more. Now, I expect Winery more than Odegaard to receive the ball a lot more on that right-hand side and then maybe run into them areas, because I think Winery is a player that likes having a couple of touches on the ball before he really completes an action. A bit like Odegaard in many ways, but could be a little bit different in some ways. So you could still see our sort of same setups work, but then when we get into the final third, there's finally more options. And obviously a striker will play a lot into the final third stuff, with a striker maybe coming back to help with the build up, but also more importantly just running behind and create them gaps quickly between the midfield and the defense. And then you can get like an Odegaard in them gaps where he can really create. So I do think there's a lot to look forward to for Arsenal, and I think Zubimendi is that start of the summer that we needed. This was a necessity and a priority that we did need. I know everyone's talking about strikers and wingers, which is obviously a priority now, but let's not forget that we still needed a midfielder at the end of the day. With Jorginho leaving, our midfield being quite inconsistent with injuries and performances over the last couple of years, and I just think we needed a calm player in there to come in, add experience and add quality, which I am exactly happy that Zubimendi is bringing. And this is the real major coup, I think, other than maybe Rice for Arteta, that he's got at the club, because you're not looking at the finances here, you've got to look at the want that people have had for him. We've seen the links to Real Madrid, even though I don't know how legitimate they were, but we know Liverpool wanted him last summer, we know City wanted him over the last 18 months, and the fact that he was willing to wait and wait and wait, and we were as well, to finally get him in now, I think is a brilliant achievement, and it's something that we should be excited about. I think he will surprise a lot of people. I think his leadership also will be a big thing that a lot of you will see, and now he's going to get a full preseason with the squad where he can get in, we can sort the tactics out, and I'm sure he'll understand, and I think the midfield is just going to look so much better with Zubimendi. Now let me know in the comments what you guys think about Martin Zubimendi. If you want to watch some of my other tactical videos about Zubimendi, I've done loads on the channel. There's some big ones I've done for over the last 18 months, so I'd go and recommend watching them for a more in-depth display of where he can really fit in. But this was just basically a wrap up of the deal, and I'm very happy that he's joined. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you as always, and I'll see you in the next one.